much, Pratap. Thank you, Falguni, for inviting me. I'm really delighted to be here. I think it's remarkable that you've put together in this room such an outstanding group of people who are pushing very hard to create something new in the country. And as an environmentalist, I also was very happy to hear that when the awards were given, a number of entries were said that they were green and that sustainability has clearly been one of the hallmarks of good buildings, good construction. So that makes me happy. But I'm not here to tell you that everything is okay. I'm here to push you to do better. Because the crisis in India is enormous and we need clearly to do something different. I mean, clearly one of the biggest crises, one of the biggest challenges in India is going to be the building sector. 70% of India still remains unbuilt. So the big issue is, can we build right? And that's, for an environmentalist, that's the big issue. That you will have an explosion in building. And that so much of India is still unbuilt. So can we build right? And the reason this is so important is that we know the building sector has a massive ecological footprint. If you take just energy, it consumes 40% of the electricity, and this data is 2013 based, which means that you're basically going to see huge increases in the years to come. All over the world, the building sector has one of the biggest ecological footprint. And so getting buildings right is imperative for environmental sustainability. It is imperative particularly in an age of climate change. And so it is and I'm really happy for that you've asked me to be here, because it's important for us to see what we need to do more of. What has happened in India is that you do have the Energy Conservation Code, the ECDC, but it is based on the design, and it is technically supposed to and expected to improve the performance of buildings by reducing energy use by 30 to 40%, 40 to 60% in fact. But nobody knows if ECBC actually works. And the reason is that ECBC has been for building design. And there is no link today, even today in the states that have made ECBC mandatory, there is no link to actual performance. And the reason this, in my view, is a serious problem is because none of you really know whether the design that you are putting in is bringing in the results that should happen, and so you're not able to make further improvements. As a country, we know that most designs, most areas of engineering are iterative. They improve over time. They improve by learning, by seeing, by sharing knowledge. But if that knowledge doesn't exist, you cannot share it. And so the iterative nature of architecture, of improving buildings so that we actually know that they are performing, is not happening. That feedback loop must be established. The same thing happens with GRIHA and IGBC. Another very important instruments to know that your building is green. That's a rating system. It's an instrument. Governments are using that instrument today to give incentives, whether it's property tax, FSI, even fast track EC. But is it working in practice? Again, there's a fundamental flaw. Nobody knows. It's an opaque system even today. There is very little information in the public domain on the green measures, on the costs and the paybacks. There is virtually no information in the public domain on the actual performance. When IGBC had put forward some of the information on the actual performance of their buildings, just in terms of energy, we compared them to the EPI of what was put out by BE. And you will see in most cases, many cases, those buildings failed. And we know that there is a difference between what you design and who uses and how they use it and how the operation of the building will happen. But that's the connection we need to make. That's the better understanding we need to have, so that green is actually green. And we don't end up by saying it is green, but it's actually brown inside. And that is going to be something that we certainly are pushing, and I hope you will all give your voice to this as well, to say we need to build a community of better practitioners, and for that we need better information. We also believe that these ratings must work in real life for them to get the incentives. Because if government patronage is being given, if incentives are being given, if you are getting a property tax incentive or an FSI incentive, that must happen based on performance and not on design. And that's critical because if, again, this is so much to do with customer information. Tomorrow if I am asked to pay a higher price for a green feature, I must know that it will work. For me to know that, I must have information in the public domain. And that information cannot be design based, it has to be performance based. The question also is that will India really build brown and then green, or will we actually build green? If you take glass, my favorite example, if you take glass, today the building codes actually allow you a very high wall to window ratio. And then the building codes say to be efficient, you need the facade to be insulated and you need to have double, triple insulated windows. So you're basically saying that you can put a lot of glass, which is actually very inefficient in a country like India, and then you have to green it by putting double, triple insulated windows, by buying very expensive appliances which are very efficient, energy efficient. And this is when we know that glass buildings work well in other parts of the world, but in a country like India, we need to build ecologically appropriate buildings. For us, ventilation is important. And I know that a campaigner against air pollution in Delhi, I know that we have very polluted air. But that does not mean that you see your buildings. It means that we clean up the air. So you cannot keep arguing that we need to build the glass, which actually traps heat. Even with the data from new studies are showing that even with double, triple insulated glass facades, it does not matter. And the other thing is, in India we have very high intensity sunlight, and this will increase. You have already seen today one of the biggest impacts of climate change is you will see more intense heat, more intense cold. You will see more rainy days, more extreme rainy days, but you will see more glare as well. And so in all this, we put a lot of glass, but then there is glare, artificial lights have to go up, shades have to come down, and as a result of it, energy consumption goes up. So the question for green builders is today that do you first build inefficiently and then make it more efficient, or do you build from the very beginning so that your building is energy and resource efficient? The question also for a country like India is, are we talking about efficiency or are we also going to talk about sufficiency? The air conditioner, I have a list of environmental criminals, and it doesn't include people. It includes other things. It includes diesel cars, it includes the flush toilet, and it includes the air conditioner. If you just take the air conditioner, 30% of Delhi's total electricity use is from air conditioner use. 60% of peak load in Delhi which data is available, and I'm sure it's the same in Mumbai, Bangalore, everywhere else, is from AC. We've just done a study recently where we've looked at, we tested air conditioners available in the market. We got them tested at a lab, and we found that at high heat, a 5-star AC performs as badly as a 1-star AC. And this is because the way our testing protocols have been designed, we've actually designed them so that we test an air conditioner for mild climates and not for hot climates. Our study also shows, and that's very important for people who are building, is that there is a huge energy penalty when air conditioners are used at 20 degrees or less. And most, or in fact below 27 degrees centigrade. And we also know that to work an air conditioner, you actually need more ventilation. This kind of air conditioning space is the worst because you have bad comfort factor. And that's why all of you have to wear suits and ties, completely inappropriate clothing, and make sure that you overcool a building because you get a wow factor out of it. And what this needs to change towards is to make sure that we actually have a bush shirt rule or a kurta rule in India. We do move to 26, 27 degrees, but for that you need comfort, which means you need ventilation. You cannot get rid of the fan, you cannot get rid of the window. You cannot get rid of the shade that you would put on a building. So, this is the challenge. Not to maximize by maximizing, but the challenge for all of you is to minimize, and that results in maximization. So, if you're looking at the new generation architecture, which I know many of you are practicing, it begins with first reducing the energy demand through passive architecture, through shadings on building, through orientation of the building, so that you first make sure you don't need that much energy. And then you insulate. And that's clearly where the big cost in long term is going to be the insulation cost. And that's only then you talk about efficient appliances. So first you reduce, and then you go in for efficient appliances, and then once you've done that, you say, I will use renewable energy for my minimized energy demand. And the reason is that energy generation itself is costly. So it only makes sense when you reduce demand that you actually use that energy. And that's really building sense. The one thing that we do not want to do is to become like the American building sector. If you take the American building sector, you will find that between 1990 to 2013, emissions from the US building sector have increased by 30%. And this is when they do not have a 70% stock which is unbuilt. Most cities are already built. Most homes are already built. Yet their energy emissions are increasing in the building sector. And the reason they are increasing is because US homes are becoming bigger. Each generation of American homes are becoming bigger and bigger. So the more the space to cool, the more the space to heat, the bigger the energy cost. This is data from the Department of Energy in the US. You will see each generation, the homes have become bigger. And this, if you compare with other countries, just shows you the flatulence that exists in the US. Compare it to US, Germany, compare US to Germany, Japan, UK and Russia in terms of square foot, and you get a clear idea of just the scale of their buildings. And as a result of it, and this is really the warning for India, as a result of it, all their efforts to green their buildings, to make their appliances more efficient, are getting negated. So on one hand, they are spending huge amounts of effort to green buildings, to improve insulation, to make their appliances more efficient, and that is getting negated. I'm finishing. I'm used to this. And at the end, I want to talk about the whole issue about smart cities. Just to leave you with some thoughts that it's not just about smart buildings, but it's really about how we need smart and green cities as well. And for this, we really need to push the envelope to bring best practice into policy. And that efforts in individual buildings must be upscaled. They must be built into smart policies. Only then will we make a difference. We have just completed a new study on ship flow diagrams for different cities of India, where we've looked at where does India's shift go. And you will find city after city, and we've done this for almost 30 cities now across the country. You will find that most people don't know where the ship goes. But this makes for a very unsmart city. We've also just done a new book on solid waste, so that we actually explain to people what we need to do in terms of minimizing waste. But at the end, smart is as smart does. You need to define smart cities as livable and equitable cities. You cannot build cities first as car-centric cities and then try and fit in a pedestrian pathway, a cycle lane, a bus track, and just an ability to cross the road. If you build a car-centric city, you'll never be able to do that. You cannot build a city which brings its water from further and further away, has huge costs of distribution, losses in distributing the water, and then do rainwater harvesting at the household level. You cannot destroy your lakes and ponds, your recharge zones of the city, and then say that you will not have floods. And you cannot plan on not looking at sewage. Sewage is not the underbelly of the city. Sewage is something that we need to first think about before we even think about building our homes. And this can only change when we understand that the current growth model of urbanization is resource intensive, it is capital intensive, and it leads to inequitable and unsustainable growth. So the invention, the reinvention of this growth model is really what all of you need to do and do much more of. But for this, we need to be inventive, we need to be inclusive, and most importantly, we need to be appropriate. Thank you very much.